Hey. 42 here. On May 8, 2026, the United States government did something it has never done before in the history of this country. Without warning, without a press conference, without a single senator standing at a podium, they put 162 classified files about UFOs on the internet. No security clearance. No FOIA request. No waiting. Just a URL. /UFO. Go look. I'm going to take you through everything in those files. And I mean everything. The Apollo astronaut sightings. The orbs that launch other orbs. The objects making 90-degree turns at 80 miles per hour. The ancient cases that go back to the 1940s. The physics that shouldn't be possible. And the question that nobody in Washington is willing to answer out loud: what are they still not showing us? But before we get there, I need to give you the full context. Because if you want to understand why this release matters, you need to understand 60 years of the government lying to your face about this. So we're starting at the beginning. Part 1. The cover-up that started in 1947. On the morning of June 24, 1947, a private pilot named Kenneth Arnold was flying his small plane over the Cascade Mountains in Washington state when he saw something he couldn't explain. 9 objects, flying in formation, moving at speeds he estimated at over 1,700 miles per hour. He described them as moving like saucers skipping across water. The next day, every newspaper in America ran the story. That's where the term flying saucer comes from. 2 weeks later, something crashed in the desert outside Roswell, New Mexico. What happened next set the template for every government UFO response for the next 70 years. The Army Air Force initially issued a press release saying they had recovered a flying disc. Then, within 24 hours, they changed the story. It was a weather balloon. Nothing to see here. The officer who issued the original press release was reassigned. The debris was flown to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Witnesses were told to keep quiet, and the government moved on. We now know from documents declassified over the following decades that the government took the Roswell incident very seriously indeed. The FBI field office sent a teletype to J. Edgar Hoover himself, describing the recovered object as a disc-like object. The Air Materiel Command at Wright-Patterson was ordered to examine the material. The base commander at Roswell, Colonel William Blanchard, never publicly changed his account. What actually crashed at Roswell? The official explanation eventually settled on Project Mogul, a classified high-altitude balloon program designed to monitor Soviet nuclear tests. That explanation came in 1994, 47 years after the crash. Whether you believe it or not, the pattern was established. The government lied first, then dripped out a more palatable explanation years later. Part 2. Project Blue Book and the Science They Buried. In 1948, the United States Air Force launched Project Sign, the first official government investigation into UFO sightings. The investigators weren't skeptics. They were serious military and scientific minds who found what they considered compelling evidence that some of the objects being reported were not human-made aircraft. Their internal report, known as the Estimate of the Situation, concluded that flying saucers were real and that they were interplanetary in origin. The report went all the way up to Air Force Chief of Staff General Hoyt Vandenberg. He rejected it. He ordered the report destroyed. He said it lacked proof. Project Sign became Project Grudge, which had a different mandate. Not investigation. Debunking. The goal was to explain everything away. A cloud. A weather balloon. A planet. A hallucination. The project produced a report that concluded all UFO reports could be explained by conventional means. The investigators who disagreed were pushed out. Then came Project Blue Book, which ran from 1952 to 1969. Over 17 years, Blue Book collected 12,618 reports. Of those, 701 were officially listed as unexplained. Not explained away. Not attributed to natural phenomena. Genuinely unexplained. Among those 701 cases, lights performing impossible maneuvers over Washington, D.C. in 1952, seen by multiple radar operators and pilots simultaneously. A mass sighting over Level in Texas in 1957, where a large glowing object caused car engines to stall and stop. The Lonnie Zamora case in 1964, where a police officer watched an oval craft land in the New Mexico desert and leave physical impressions in the ground, backed up by civilian witnesses. But Project Blue Book wasn't really about investigation. It was about managing public perception. The Condon Report, produced by the University of Colorado in 1969 and used to justify shutting Blue Book down, concluded there was nothing worth investigating. Years later, internal communications showed that the conclusion had been decided before the investigation began. The lead investigator, Edward Condon, had reportedly told colleagues at a dinner party before the study was completed that the conclusion was already written. Blue Book was shut down. The Air Force announced it had found no evidence of extraterrestrial activity. And for the next 40 years, the official position of the United States government was, there is nothing to see here. Part 3. The Silence Breaks. ATIP and the 2017 Bombshell. Fast forward to December 16, 2017. The New York Times runs a front-page story that the world was not prepared for. The headline: Glowing Auras and Black Money. The Pentagon's mysterious UFO program. For the first time, it was publicly revealed that the Department of Defense had been running a secret program called the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, ATIP, funded by a $22 million black budget appropriation hidden in the defense budget. The program was championed by Senate Majority Leader Harry Reid, who had become convinced that the phenomenon deserved serious investigation. The director of the program was a man named Luis Elizondo. He had spent years inside the Pentagon trying to get the military to take UAP seriously. When he felt the program was being suppressed, he resigned from the DoD, walked out the door, and went public. In the same article, 3 videos were released to the public. Video footage from U.S. Navy aircraft shot with gun cameras showing objects performing maneuvers that defied known physics. Fast, odd, maneuverable. No wings. No exhaust. No visible propulsion. The 3 videos are known by their codenames: Fliron, Go Fast, and Gimbal. Fliron, also known as the Tic Tac video, was recorded in November 24 off the coast of California during USS Nimitz Carrier Group operations. Pilot Commander David Fravor was flying an FA-18F Super Hornet when he was directed toward an object that had been tracked by the USS Princeton's radar for 2 weeks. It had been descending from 80,000 feet to 20,000 feet and then hovering. When Fravor approached, he saw a white object, 40 feet long, shaped like a tic-tac, moving erratically above a churning patch of ocean. When he turned toward it, it accelerated away at a speed he said was unlike anything he'd ever seen. Within seconds, it was gone. When his wingman flew to a pre-arranged rendezvous point 60 miles away, the object was already there waiting. David Fravor had 18 years of fighter pilot experience. He had deployed in combat. When asked about the tic-tac, he said it was not from this world. Go Fast and Gimbal were both recorded in 2015 off the East Coast. In the Gimbal video, an object is seen rotating in a way that appears to defy any known aerodynamic explanation. In the Go Fast video, an object is tracked moving at extraordinarily high speed at low altitude, with no visible means of propulsion. The Pentagon officially confirmed the authenticity of all 3 videos in April 2020. Part 4. Things Get Stranger. The USS Roosevelt and the Swarm. The Tic Tac wasn't a one-off. In 2014 and 2015, pilots from the USS Theodore Roosevelt Carrier Strike Group, based out of Virginia Beach, began encountering unknown objects during training operations off the East Coast. The encounters were so frequent and so disturbing that the pilots took extraordinary steps. They filed safety reports. They demanded investigations. They were told essentially to stop talking about it. Multiple pilots spoke to journalists and investigators about what they saw. The objects were described as white, round, or oblong, sometimes translucent. They appeared at 30,000 feet and then descended to the ocean's surface. They had no visible wings, no exhaust plumes, no navigational lights. They were capable of traveling at hypersonic speeds, stopping instantly, and changing direction without any visible maneuvering surfaces. One pilot, Lieutenant Ryan Graves, described flying through a swarm of these objects. Not one, not two, a swarm. Operating in a defined airspace that U.S. military aircraft were using for training. The objects were in restricted airspace. They were there every day, sometimes all day. The encounters went on for months. In 2023, Ryan Graves testified before Congress. Under oath, he said, "If everyone could see what I see, we would be having a very different conversation." He went on to found Americans for Safe Aerospace, an organization that has collected hundreds of pilot reports that never entered the official record because pilots feared career consequences for reporting them. Part 5. David Grusch and the Bombshell Testimony. On June 5, 2023, a former Air Force intelligence officer named David Grusch gave an interview to The Debrief and News Nation that sent shockwaves through Washington. Grusch, who had worked on the UAP task force and served as a co-lead for UAP analysis at the National Reconnaissance Office, claimed that the United States government had been secretly running programs for decades to recover and reverse engineer non-human craft. He said he had provided classified information to the Intelligence Community Inspector General, who found his testimony credible and urgent. He said he had been denied access to certain programs, and that colleagues who tried to report information about these programs faced retaliation, including threats. The claim was extraordinary, not just that UAPs existed, but that the government had recovered physical materials from them, and had been hiding this from Congress, from oversight committees, and from the American public for decades. On July 26, 2023, Grusch testified before the House Oversight Subcommittee on National Security, the Border, and Foreign Affairs. This was a public hearing. Under oath. On the record, he said, "I was informed, in the course of my official duties, of a multi-decade program to collect and reverse engineer non-human craft." He said he could not provide specifics in a public setting, but had provided details in a classified briefing. He said he was aware of human casualties associated with these programs. He said he had spoken with numerous witnesses who had direct knowledge of the programs. The committee members notably did not push back hard. They didn't dismiss him. Several said they believed him. Several said they had been given classified briefings that they could not discuss publicly. Two other witnesses testified alongside Grusch, David Fravor, the Tic Tac pilot, and Ryan Graves, the Roosevelt pilot. Both confirmed the reality of their encounters. Graves said he knew of at least a dozen other pilots who had similar experiences and refused to come forward out of fear. The hearing ended with more questions than answers. The most important question: if Grusch is right, what has the government actually recovered? Yeah. Part 6. The physics problem. Here's what makes serious scientists pay attention to UAP reports, even the ones who start out skeptical. The behaviors reported across hundreds of independent sightings, from radar operators, from military pilots, from ground observers, from sensors, describe things that are not possible with any known propulsion technology. And not impossible in the way that we haven't figured it out yet, is impossible. Impossible in the way that suggests the physics itself is different. 5 specific capabilities are consistently reported. They've been called the 5 observables. They were first formally identified by Luis Elizondo based on military reports from ATIP. First, instantaneous acceleration. Objects accelerating from a standstill to hypersonic speeds in fractions of a second. To put this in context, the highest recorded acceleration experienced by a human in a fighter jet is about 9 Instantaneous acceleration to 10,000 mph would produce forces of several thousand G. No biological pilot could survive it. No current aircraft structure could withstand it. Second, hypersonic velocities without signatures. When any object moves through the atmosphere at hypersonic speed, above Mach 5, it produces a sonic boom, a shock wave, plasma heating. None of these have been observed with UAPs. They move fast. They make no sound. They leave no heat signature. The physics of how that's possible is unknown. Third, low observability or cloaking. Objects that appear and disappear from radar. Objects that are visible to the naked eye but invisible to radar. Objects that are visible on infrared but not in visible light. This suggests active camouflage technology of a kind that doesn't exist in any known military's arsenal. Fourth, transmedium travel. Objects moving seamlessly between air, water, and space. The Nimitz encounters involved objects diving into the ocean at high speed with no impact spray. Multiple reports involve objects entering and exiting the ocean. For a conventional aircraft, transitioning from high-speed air travel to water entry at those speeds would be catastrophic. The physics of doing it seamlessly is not understood. Fifth, positive lift without aerodynamic structures. No wings. No rotors. No visible thrust. Objects hovering and maneuvering in apparent defiance of gravity. Conventional flight requires aerodynamic lift or thrust. These objects have neither. Avi Loeb, a professor of science at Harvard and former chair of Harvard's astronomy department, has been one of the most prominent scientists to take UAP seriously. He launched the Galileo project in 2021, specifically to apply scientific rigor to UAP investigation. He's deployed sensor arrays, analyzed data, and published in peer-reviewed journals. He says, "The conservative approach would be to acknowledge our ignorance and investigate without prejudice. The alternative, that everything being reported is misidentification, sensor error, or psychological phenomenon, requires dismissing thousands of reports from trained observers with consistent characteristics across independent incidents spanning decades." Part 7. The Apollo Files. What Buzz Aldrin Saw. Now we get to the material from the May 8th release that hit me hardest personally. 3 Apollo missions. 3 separate incidents. All of them classified. All of them sitting in a government filing cabinet for over 50 years. Let's start with Apollo 11. The mission that put the first humans on the moon. During the post-flight technical debriefing in July 1969, Buzz Aldrin described, on the record, under questioning from NASA engineers, 3 separate anomalous observations from the mission. The first was an object observed on the outbound journey to the moon. The crew saw something outside the spacecraft that they could not identify. They initially wondered if it was the upper stage of the Saturn V rocket that had detached earlier. But when they checked the position, it wasn't. The object appeared to be L-shaped, or described by some accounts as having a specific configuration unlike any piece of the Saturn V hardware. They watched it for an extended period. The second incident was lights inside the cabin. Unexplained flashes of light, visible to the crew, with no identifiable source. Not reflections. Not instrument illumination. Flashes. The third was a bright object observed on the return journey that the crew tentatively attributed to a laser, though Aldrin acknowledged at the time that this was speculation. Now, why were these 3 observations classified? Why are they only being released now, in 2026, when Buzz Aldrin died in 2023 at the age of 93? The answer from the Pentagon is that the debriefing document was classified as a matter of routine. It contained technical mission details that were sensitive during the space race. But read those 3 observations again. An unidentified external object. Unexplained lights inside a sealed spacecraft. A bright object on re-entry. If astronauts on the International Space Station reported those 3 things tomorrow, it would be international news. Apollo 12. November 1969. Pete Conrad and Alan Bean on the lunar surface. A photograph taken during the moonwalk shows the shadows of the astronauts against the lunar regolith, and above the horizon, a highlighted area that the Pentagon now officially describes as showing unidentified phenomena. They can't tell you what it is. It's in the image. It wasn't there before the mission. It's there in the photograph. Apollo 17th. Apollo 17, December 1972. The in 70. The last time humans walked on the moon. A NASA photograph from the mission shows 3 dots in a triangular formation above the lunar terrain. This photo has been publicly available for decades, but the Pentagon's official annotation and analysis of it has never been released until now. Their new preliminary analysis states there is no consensus about the nature of the anomaly. Their new analysis suggests it could be a physical object. 3 missions, 3 incidents, 50 years of silence. Part 8. The 2026 Files. Case by case. Now let's go through what's actually in the 162 files that were released on May 8, 2026. The most extraordinary case, and the one the Pentagon itself identifies as among the most compelling in its possession, involves a 2-day sequence of events in the western United States in the fall of 2023. Multiple federal law enforcement officers working in the same general area but independently of each other. No shared radio channel, no joint briefings reported the same thing. Orbs. Glowing spherical objects in the sky. Orange. Moving. And then something else. One officer reported seeing an orange orb. Large. What he described as a mother orb, releasing groups of smaller red orbs, then doing it again, releasing clusters. The second officer, filing a completely independent report, described the same sequence. Same colors. Same approximate location. Same behavior. Neither officer knew the other had filed a report until investigators started correlating them. The Pentagon's assessment in the file, they cannot explain it. They don't know if there was one orange object or multiple. They don't know what the red objects were. They don't know if the launches were connected. They classify it as unresolved. In Greece, in 2023, a video was captured by local observers showing an object performing what the Pentagon file describes as multiple 90-degree turns at approximately 80 miles per hour. To make a 90-degree turn at 80 miles per hour, any conventional aircraft would require a turning radius of several hundred meters and would experience massive G-forces. This object made the turn sharply, almost instantly, and continued on the new heading without deceleration. The video has been reviewed by military analysts. They can't explain it. In Iraq, in 2024, during routine surveillance operations, a U.S. military aircraft's targeting system picked up an object moving across the surveillance field at high speed. The crew attempted to track it. They couldn't. The object moved faster than their targeting system could follow and exited the frame. The encounter was documented and classified. It's in the new files. Over Kazakhstan, a bright object was recorded performing corkscrew maneuvers in the sky. High altitude. Moving in a helical pattern with no variation in speed. Corkscrewing. Then straight. Then corkscrewing again. For an extended period. Near Japan, a football-shaped object was photographed from the air. No wings. No exhaust. Floating. The object was tracked on radar and by visual observers. Its size was estimated at between 100 and 200 feet. It sat in the airspace. It then departed. No explanation. Going back further in the files, a 2020 report describes a line of dots followed by a trailing dot. Observed by a U.S. military operator during operations. Not a satellite train. Not a drone swarm. Unresolved. There are reports dating back to the 1940s. Early Cold War encounters over military installations. Objects hovering over nuclear weapons storage sites, which is a pattern documented separately by former Air Force officer Robert Salas, who testified that UFOs shut down nuclear missiles at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana in 1967. His account has been corroborated by other officers. Part 9. What the government says it's doing now. The release on May 8th wasn't a one-off. The Pursue program, the Presidential Unsealing and Reporting System for UAP Encounters, is an ongoing, institutionalized effort with a specific mandate. At the direction of President Trump, the Department of War, which was reorganized from the Department of Defense earlier this year, is now overseeing a multi-agency task force to find, review, declassify, and release UAP-related materials from across the entire federal government. This includes not just military files but intelligence community records, State Department cables, FBI investigative files, NASA data, and Department of Energy materials. The National Archives has established a dedicated record group for UAP materials, a formal archival category, like the JFK assassination files, which means there is an institutional infrastructure now committed to this process. The program is releasing materials on a rolling basis. Every few weeks. New tranches. They say they have tens of millions of records under review. The Secretary of Defense, in announcing the release, said, and I want to quote this directly, that the public can make up their own minds. He did not say the objects were extraterrestrial. He did not say they weren't. He gave the public the data and stepped back. There is, simultaneously, a new UAP Disclosure Act that has been introduced in Congress in 2026. It would mandate the declassification and release of all federal records related to UAP within 180 days, with narrow national security exceptions. It has bipartisan support, but it has not yet passed. What's remarkable about the current political moment is the consistency across administrations and across party lines. Trump is releasing the files. But it was Biden's administration that established the All-Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, AARO, in 2022. It was Obama who publicly acknowledged that there are objects in the skies that we don't know exactly what they are. It was Clinton who tried to access classified Roswell files and was told, according to his chief of staff, that certain things were beyond presidential clearance. Part 10. The Skeptic's Case. I want to be intellectually honest here, because the skeptic's case deserves to be heard. Most of what has been released is ambiguous. Blurry infrared footage, eyewitness testimony, reports that describe anomalous behavior but provide no definitive physical evidence. The 2024 AARO report specifically found no verifiable evidence of recovered alien technology. Of the 757 UAP reports analyzed in that report, 118 were fully resolved, and every single one of those resolved cases turned out to be a conventional object. Balloons, drones, birds, aircraft, weather phenomena. The human brain is extraordinarily good at pattern recognition and extraordinarily bad at accurately estimating the speed, distance, and size of objects in three-dimensional space, especially under stress. The Nimitz Tic Tac encounter, the most compelling single case in the modern era, still has not been definitively explained. But not explained is not the same as alien. The object has been analyzed by numerous physicists and engineers who have proposed conventional explanations. Some suggest it could have been a classified US program. Some suggest sensor artifacts. None of these explanations are satisfying, but they exist. The David Grusch testimony is extraordinary and must be taken seriously. But it is also testimony. It is one person's account of what he was told by other people about things they claim to have seen or known. The evidence chain is: Grusch heard from sources who claim to have witnessed or participated in programs. That's compelling. It's not proof. Benford's law, and I know I used this in a different video, applies to large data sets, not to 5 UAP cases. Applying statistical forensic tools to small anecdote collections tells you almost nothing. The history of UAP investigation is littered with cases that seemed inexplicable until they weren't. It's also littered with cases that seemed inexplicable and remained inexplicable. Distinguishing between the two requires evidence. And most of what has been released is not evidence. It's documentation of experiences. That said, the cumulative weight of consistent reports from trained observers over 75 years, the behaviors that defy known physics across independent incidents, the pattern of government classification and suppression, the testimony of credible witnesses under oath. All of this creates a probability distribution that serious people are starting to take serious. Part 11. What the aliens would mean. Let's go somewhere uncomfortable for a minute. Assume for the sake of argument that some of what is being described is real. That some of these objects are not human-made. What does that actually mean? It means that another intelligence exists in the universe. That is either an intelligence that evolved somewhere other than Earth, which would rewrite every major question in cosmology, biology, and theology, or it is an intelligence that evolved on Earth in a form we don't recognize, which would rewrite our understanding of terrestrial history. Either answer is civilization altering. It means this intelligence has been here, observing or interacting with this planet, for at least 75 years of documented modern sightings, and almost certainly much longer given pre-modern accounts of aerial phenomena in historical records going back thousands of years. Ancient texts from Mesopotamia describe flying vehicles. Medieval European chronicles describe mysterious lights and objects in the sky. The accounts are surprisingly consistent across cultures and centuries that had no contact with each other. It means the objects are not hostile in any obvious sense. If an intelligence capable of the behaviors described in these reports wanted to harm us, we would already know about it. The encounters have been passive, observational. Whatever they are, they appear to be watching. It means the question of why the government has been hiding this, if they have been hiding it, becomes deeply complicated. How do you tell 8 billion people that there is something in the sky you don't understand and cannot control? How do you maintain institutional authority in the face of a phenomenon that your most sophisticated technology can't track, your best pilots can't catch, and your physicists can't explain? The suppression, if it happened, was arguably a rational response to an impossible situation. And it raises the question that no government official will answer on the record. If you've recovered craft, what did you learn from them? Have you been reverse engineering? For how long? To what end? Part 12. The question nobody will answer. Here's where we are. The most sweeping UAP disclosure in American history happened yesterday. 162 files. 400 incidents. Objects photographed near the moon. Federal law enforcement watching orbs launch orbs. Navy pilots chasing something they can't catch. Physicists who can't explain the behaviors. Congressional hearings under oath. A whistleblower with intelligence community credentials. A government program with tens of millions of records under review. The government is not saying it's aliens. They are saying, we have documented incidents we cannot explain. We are releasing that documentation. You decide. That is either the most honest thing a government has ever done about this subject, or it is the most sophisticated misdirection in the history of public relations. Releasing the inexplicable to distract from what is explicable. Giving the public the mysteries while keeping the answers. I don't know which it is. I genuinely don't. What I know is this. For 70 years, the official position was that there was nothing to investigate. Now the official position is that there is more to release every few weeks. That shift is not nothing. That is not a small thing. That is an institution that has spent 7 decades building a wall around the subject, and that wall is now coming down brick by brick. The files are at war.gov/UFO. They're public. You can read the original documents. Watch the footage. Look at the photographs. The Apollo 17 image with the triangular formation above the lunar surface. The FBI composite sketch of a bronze metallic ellipsoid 130 feet long. The infrared footage of objects that the most advanced military in human history cannot explain. And when you've looked at all of it, ask yourself the question that the Secretary of Defense declined to answer. If it's not ours, and it's not theirs, then whose is it? I'm 42, and I'll see you in the next one. Addendum. The cases they almost buried. Europe, South America, and the nuclear sites. The United States is not the only government that has been sitting on these files. In the United Kingdom, the Ministry of Defense ran its own UAP investigation program for decades. The program, known informally as the British UFO Desk, operated within the Air Staff Secretariat and handled thousands of sightings reports from military personnel, airline pilots, and civilians. The most famous case in British history happened on the night of December 26, 1980, in Rendlesham Forest in Suffolk, right next to RAF Bentwaters and RAF Woodbridge, two bases used by the United States Air Force at the time. Sergeant Jim Peniston was one of the first U.S. military personnel to approach an unknown craft that had landed in the forest. He described a triangular craft, black and smooth, with geometric symbols on its surface. He touched it. He sketched the symbols in his notebook. Lieutenant Colonel Charles Halt, the deputy base commander, personally witnessed the object the following night, along with several airmen, and recorded the encounter on a handheld audio recorder. That recording still exists. Halt's memo to the Ministry of Defense is one of the most credible UAP documents ever produced by a senior military officer. The memo describes lights in the forest, animals at a nearby farm going wild, a beam of light from the object that illuminated the ground near Halt's feet. Radiation readings taken at the landing site the next day showed levels 3 times above background and a triangular pattern matching the imprints left in the soil. MOD's official conclusion? No defense significance. In France, the government has been arguably more transparent than any other major power. The French space agency, CNES, established the GPAN unit, the Unidentified Phenomena Investigation and Studies Group, which has been publicly releasing UAP case files since 2007. France has documented over 3,000 UAP cases, and GPAN officially classifies approximately 28% of them as Category D, meaning they cannot be explained by any known phenomenon after full investigation. Brazil has one of the richest documented UAP histories of any country. In 1977, a series of encounters in the Brazilian state of Pará, an event known as Operation Prado, involved hundreds of civilians being approached by objects that emitted beams of light. The Brazilian Air Force deployed aircraft and personnel to investigate. The investigation files, when they were eventually declassified decades later, showed that military observers had themselves witnessed and documented the objects. The Brazilian government has been releasing UAP files periodically since 2009. But let me tell you about something that gets significantly less attention than it deserves. UFOs and nuclear weapons. The pattern is specific and it is consistent. UAPs are observed near nuclear weapons storage facilities, nuclear power plants, and nuclear testing sites at a rate that is wildly disproportionate to any random distribution. This is not a fringe claim. Robert Hastings, a researcher who has spent 40 years documenting this specific phenomenon, has collected testimony from over 160 U.S. military veterans who witnessed UAP activity near nuclear sites during their service. In 1967, at Malmstrom Air Force Base in Montana, a flight of 10 Minuteman nuclear missiles was shut down, simultaneously, one by one, as a glowing red object was observed hovering above the launch control facility. The missiles went from ready status to offline status in sequence. This is not a claim from civilian witnesses. This is the testimony of Robert Salas, the launch control officer on duty, and it has been corroborated by the missile maintenance crews who were outside that morning. The Air Force investigated. They could not explain how the missiles were disabled. In 1976, over the Bandar Abbas Air Base in Iran, which at the time housed U.S.-supplied aircraft, a series of encounters were documented in a now declassified Defense Intelligence Agency report. An F-4 Phantom jet scrambled to intercept a large luminous object. As it approached, the jet's electronic systems failed. The pilot tried to fire a missile. The missile control panel went offline. When the jet broke off pursuit, the systems came back online. An object was separately observed to descend toward the ground at high speed. The DIA report rated the incident as an outstanding report that might be of interest to analysts. In 1981, at a Soviet nuclear storage facility near Bielorussia in Ukraine, a guard reportedly observed a glowing sphere hovering directly over the facility's nuclear munitions depot. The security log from that night recorded an object the size of a 5-story building hovering silently for several minutes before departing. This report only became known after the fall of the Soviet Union, when KGB files on UAP were briefly accessible to researchers. The pattern is not ambiguous. Whatever these objects are, they are interested in nuclear weapons. The question of why is one that the 2026 files do not answer. The ocean connection, use unidentified submersible objects. There is a dimension to the UAP phenomenon that receives even less mainstream attention than the aerial sightings, and that is underwater. The US Navy has, for decades, tracked unidentified objects moving through the ocean at speeds that exceed any known submarine or underwater vehicle by orders of magnitude. These objects, sometimes called UFOs, or unidentified submersible objects, are typically described as detected by sonar moving at speeds of several hundred miles per hour at depths where pressure would destroy any known vessel. In 2019, the USS Omaha, a Navy littoral combat ship, filmed a spherical object hovering over the ocean surface during operations off the coast of San Diego. The object then descended into the ocean. The ship's crew searched for wreckage or evidence of what had entered the water. They found nothing. That video is in the official US Navy UAP case files. It is part of the material that ARO has reviewed. The Navy confirmed its authenticity in 2021. The Nimitz encounters in 2004 involved the objects entering and exiting the ocean. Commander David Grusch described watching the object dive beneath the surface at high speed and then re-emerge. The ocean in that area of California is thousands of feet deep. The pressure at depth would destroy any conventional aircraft. The object transitioned between aerial and aquatic environments seamlessly at high speed without apparent damage. If you take the 5 observables, instantaneous acceleration, hypersonic velocity without signatures, low observability, transmedium travel, and positive lift without aerodynamic structures. Transmedium travel is in some ways the most difficult to explain. The fluid dynamics of moving between air and water at high speed are extreme. The engineering required to do it without catastrophic damage doesn't exist in any human arsenal. Some researchers have suggested that the concentration of sightings near bodies of water, oceans, lakes, reservoirs, and the USO reports are not coincidental. That whatever these objects are, they use bodies of water in some way, either for concealment, for resources, or for a purpose we haven't identified. The 2026 Pursue files include several USO-adjacent reports. Objects seen entering the ocean near military operations areas. Sonar contacts that don't match any known vessel. One report from the Pacific describes sonar operators tracking an object moving at a velocity that their equipment had no category for. The contact lasted 17 minutes. Then it was gone. Oumuamua, and the question of where they come from. In October 2017, the same month the New York Times broke the ATIP story, astronomers detected an object passing through our solar system. It was the first interstellar object ever observed by humanity. Something that had traveled from another star system to pass through ours. They named it Oumuamua, the Hawaiian word for scout. Oumuamua was strange from the beginning. Its shape was unlike any asteroid or comet ever observed. Elongated, with a length-to-width ratio of approximately 10:1. It tumbled as it moved, rotating end over end every 7.3 hours. And as it left our solar system, something happened that upended every model astronomers had. It accelerated. Objects leaving a solar system decelerate due to the gravitational pull of the sun. Oumuamua accelerated. There was no visible outgassing, the process by which comets accelerate due to ice turning to gas from solar heating, because there was no visible coma. No tail. Nothing to explain the acceleration in any conventional model. Avi Loeb, the Harvard astronomer who has become the most prominent scientific voice on this subject, published a paper in November 2018 with Shmuel Biley suggesting that Oumuamua might be an artificial object. A light sail, he proposed, pushed by radiation pressure. Not a natural object. A piece of technology from another civilization. The scientific community largely rejected this interpretation. Most astronomers favored a novel type of comet, or a hydrogen iceberg, or other natural explanations. But Loeb pointed out something important. Every proposed natural explanation came with its own set of anomalies and its own set of required assumptions. Oumuamua was strange regardless of what you decided it was. His argument was not that Oumuamua was definitely artificial. His argument was that the possibility of an artificial origin should not be dismissed without evidence, and that the scientific community's reflexive rejection of that hypothesis was not scientific. It was cultural. In 2023, Loeb recovered what appeared to be interstellar material from the ocean floor near Papua New Guinea, small metallic spheres that had anomalous compositions, inconsistent with any known solar system material. He published the findings. The scientific community was skeptical. He stood by the data. Whether Oumuamua was natural or artificial is still unknown, but it passed through our solar system in 2017. And in 2023, an interstellar meteor, IM-1, was confirmed to have entered Earth's atmosphere over the Pacific Ocean. The material Loeb recovered from the ocean floor was potentially from that object. We are, turns out, already in contact with material from other star systems. Whether that material is natural debris or something more is the question that serious science is now actively investigating. The sociological question, why now? I want to spend some time on a question that I think is under-examined. Why is this happening now? The pattern of increasing disclosure over the last decade is not random. The 2017 Time story. The 2019 Navy acknowledgement of the videos. The 2020 Pentagon confirmation. The 2021 preliminary UAP assessment released by the Director of National Intelligence. The 2022 establishment of Aerodata. The 2023 congressional hearings. The 2024 ARO report data. And now, the 2026 Pursue release. Every 18 months to 2 years, the wall comes down another layer. Why? One theory, the information is becoming impossible to suppress. With drone technology proliferating, with every civilian now carrying a high-resolution camera, with aircraft equipped with sophisticated sensors, with radar networks more dense than ever, the encounters are being documented in ways that are increasingly difficult to classify before the documentation reaches the public. The suppression strategy is losing the race. A second theory. The military and intelligence community genuinely doesn't know what these objects are and is increasingly concerned about the national security implications of not knowing. If a foreign adversary has developed technology that exhibits the 5 observables, that is an existential military threat. China and Russia are the obvious candidates. Both have sophisticated aerospace programs. Both deny any knowledge of UAPs. But American intelligence agencies have reportedly told Congress that they do not believe these objects are of Russian or Chinese origin, because the technology gaps required would be too large. A third theory. There are people inside the government who believe the public has a right to know, and who have been pushing for disclosure for years. Luis Elizondo quit. David Grusch testified. Multiple pilots have gone on the record at career risk. The pressure from inside the system is not nothing. A fourth theory. Controlled disclosure. The government knows something definitive and is releasing information in carefully managed tranches, gauging public reaction, building toward a larger revelation. This theory requires believing that the government is both enormously competent, capable of managing a multi-decade secret involving thousands of personnel, and gradually willing to unwind it for reasons that serve some strategic objective. I don't know which theory is correct. All 4 are plausible. All 4 might be partially true simultaneously. What I do know is that the strategic objective of the current moment seems to be: give the public something real without committing to a conclusion. Release the phenomena. Don't explain them. Let the public debate. Preserve institutional flexibility. And continue releasing more. It's a strategy that buys time. Fine time. As I am a trust meeting, and I want here is way. A challenge into our The final accounting. Let me give you the numbers one more time, because I think they deserve to be said clearly. 162 files released on May 8, 2026. Covering 400 incidents from agencies across the United States government. Spanning from the 1940s to 2025. Including photographs, videos, eyewitness testimony, radar data, and official analysis from the FBI, the Pentagon, NASA, and the State Department. 12,618 official reports collected by Project Blue Book between 1952 and 1969. Of those, 701 officially unexplained. 3 Apollo mission incidents. 2 involving objects observed in space. 1 involving a photograph with an anomaly that a new Pentagon analysis calls potentially a physical object. 2 days. Western United States. 2023. Orbs launching orbs. Multiple independent witnesses. No explanation. 17 years. That's how long Edward Condon's predetermined conclusion that UAPs weren't worth investigating held back scientific inquiry. 57 years. That's how long the Apollo 11 debriefing document describing Buzz Aldrin's observations was classified. 75 years. That's the approximate period of the modern UAP era. From the 1947 sightings to today. Tens of millions. That's how many records the Pursuit program says are under review right now. Every few weeks. That's how often new tranches will be released. The war is over. The war to keep this secret. Whatever the truth is, it's coming out. Not all at once. Not cleanly. Not with a press conference where someone stands up and says, here's what we know. But document by document, file by file, incident by incident. And somewhere in those tens of millions of records under review, there's an answer. Maybe several answers. Maybe answers that will change everything. The files are at war.gov/UFO. They're free. They're public. They're real. Go look. And I'll see you on the other side. I'm 42. And if you've watched this far, you already know. The universe is a lot stranger than they told.